Hi everyone, this is Bonnie from Good Earth Spa, and I've had a lot of people that I know personally that have taken an interest in my tomatoes that I've been growing. So I just wanted to do a quick little video because before I started growing my tomatoes, I looked for all kinds of information. I did Google searches, web searches, and I couldn't really find any information about growing tomatoes indoors. So, I started these tomatoes on September 17th. I planted 6 seeds. And the picture that you're seeing right now was taken on day 4, so that's after they germinated. All the seeds germinated. I'm using a mixture of it's a handmade mixture of peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. And then here is on day 6, I'm using, you can see, a little mini greenhouse seed starter, and I have some compact fluorescent lights that are just standard lights, just like you would use in your house, nothing special. And then this is also on day 6. We caught a ladybug. We didn't catch it, it just came in, so we happened to see it, so I took a picture of it. Since ladybugs are also great for plants, they eat unwanted bugs, but we never really had too much of a bug problem. Here on day 9, you can see that the plants have more than their baby leaves or cotyledon leaves, and they're starting to grow leaves. You can see right here with my pointer here and here, right in the center. So we're transplanting them, and you can see we're using just some recycled containers. I put a couple in together even though I knew that I was going to have to give them different containers. I just didn't really have anything, and what I started the seeds in is actually a berry container from strawberries. So it's really easy to get started using, just whatever you have around the house. This next picture is 14 days old, and I don't know if it's incredibly obvious here, but since I didn't have a lot of information to go off of, I did a lot of experimentation along the way. On this side, you can see the light coming from this side has more of a red spectrum lighting, and the light from this side is more in the blue spectrum. So I kept them like this to see which side grew better. And you can see a little bit they're kind of pointing this way, and then some are kind of pointing this way, so I know who is getting what. And so I kind of experiment with that a little bit. In addition, I have a different soil mix in each of these containers. And one of them was a soilless mix, I believe it was this one, and the other ones I used various amounts of soil, actual compost type soil. So we'll go to the next one. At 20 days in, you can see the light fixtures up here. They're just like little work lights that have clamps on them, and I put some white freezer paper along the walls since it is a reflective material, and you can see that they're doing very well using a fertilizer intended for vegetative growth for plants, and just alternating that with regular water. So you can see they're adding nodes and lots of leaves, just lots of growth overall. And then at 23 days, you can see that I've now transplanted into growing bags. And since it was this picture was taken in October, and at that time of year there's a lot of planters on clearance, and I was looking for planting and planters. There weren't a lot of options left, but what was out there, everything seemed to be on clearance and low price. So it's a good time of year to purchase planting supplies. But I ended up finding these online at a hydroponics store, and they worked for me just fine with soil. Another thing you'll notice over here is this little wire thing. Somebody put a political sign on my lawn, so I didn't want it there, and I decided that this would be great to repurpose as plant supports for later on. So later on I actually do use this to help hold up the weight of the tomatoes as they get bigger. And another thing down here is I made this out of cardboard, and it's just a little reminder card that I flip over to keep track of whether the plants get fertilizer next or whether they get water next. So it's basically like a coin, and on one side it says I get water next, and on the other side it says I get fertilizer next. And I've also, I did notice that, one of the lights was growing stems a lot quicker and the other light was growing leaves a lot quicker, and I did read up more on that and found that that was pretty much consistent with what should happen. So I did switch around the plants a lot and kind of rotated them like a volleyball court so that they would be exposed to the spectrums of light in a more even way. And then eventually I do change my lights, so I'll get to that. Okay, so here I have changed the lights. At this stage, the plants are 30 days old, and you can see 5 of them in here, and there's one that's beyond the camera view. And you can also see that I have some basil and cilantro. I have a couple of other types of plants, but this video is just basically focusing only on the tomatoes. So here's the tomatoes at a month old. They're looking very, very healthy. And the only thing that I would do differently is I would put them in a bigger container. This container wasn't quite big enough, and I didn't want to transfer when they started to, finally flower. I didn't want to stress the plant out. So to do it over, and a lot of it was experimental, so to do it over, I would put them in a bigger container to start with. But they are very healthy and doing very well. Okay, so skipping forward now, this is on day 52. They finally started to flower, and in case you were wondering about the lights, I gave them 18 hours of artificial light every day, and I never tried to change the light cycle. I don't have like grow lights that are high output or high intensity, what you would normally think of as grow lights. I'm just growing these under normal household lights, fluorescent lights, that is, not incandescent. They're all fluorescent, which puts out a good spectrum for plants, but you'd probably have better results if you did forced flowering, and that's something that you can read up on, but I didn't, and this is really simple. I just kept it on the same light schedule the whole way and never changed anything. So you can get tomatoes and have it be really simple. And the variety that I'm growing, I don't remember the exact name of, but it's just like a small snack tomato or a salad tomato. Okay, so that was on the 52nd day, and here is on the 55th day, where we have a flower that starts to open up. And at this point, when we start to see flowers, we know that that's great, because the next step is obviously going to be tomatoes, but you have to have flowers first. Tomatoes are a self-pollinating plant, so that's great because you don't need any bees or anything like that to come in your house. The only thing that you have to do, there's 2 main methods that I used, and the first method was you flick them. If you flick them, they'll release pollen. And if you don't want to flick them, one time I flicked them too hard and I broke a branch. So if you want to be a little bit more delicate, another way is to just take a hold of the stem a little bit and just shake it gently. So you can flick it or you can shake it. And shaking it seemed to work. So at this point, I'm now shaking these plants every single day to make sure that they're pollinated. And additionally, we're making sure that I use a very cheap pH meter and moisture meter to make sure that they stay moist enough. And obviously, you just look at the leaves, and if the leaves start to wilt, you know that they really need water, but you should try to catch it before that, because letting them get to that point can really stress your plants. So they did get to that point one time, and I was able to revive them, but you really should try to avoid that if possible. Okay, so on the 68th day, we noticed the first tomato starting to form. So you can see also over here the flowers dry up a little bit, and the tomato, there's a tomato in here too, even though it's not taken at an angle where you can see it. So this is the first tomato that we could see, and then this flower over here still looks fresh and not dried. And in this picture you can see this is on day 73. We have a tomato here, we have a tomato here, we have a tomato here, we have a flower over here and a flower over here, and there's just tomatoes starting to pop up all over the place. One thing that I didn't mention is we did start, like I said, with 6 plants, and 5 of them started to grow flowers without needing to change the lights at all. One of them didn't want to grow flowers, so I ended up culling that plant, but it was a very healthy plant otherwise, and I'm sure that in a natural circumstance it probably would have been just fine. But that's, since that happened, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. And here on day 80, you can see that my tomatoes are all over the place. They're getting bigger. You can also notice that this branch here is heavily curved. These plants grow really, really big. And I started to try and tie them together and train them down and have them, I have 2 supports that I use, the one metal frame that you saw earlier, and then a washing board, like an old-fashioned washing board that I just kind of put in between the containers and laid the tomatoes over so that the branches wouldn't break under the weight of the tomatoes. But that's partially from me training them and then pruning, and then partially from just the weight of the tomatoes bringing them down. So that's what's going on here, and it kind of looks like an odd angle. And we get lots and lots of bunches of green tomatoes because we make sure to shake them every day and pollinate the flowers. And then here on day 120, we finally start to get some red, ripe tomatoes. Now, I think it took a little bit longer than your traditional outside growing, but this tomato went full ripe in January. So while it's snowing outside, when we have several inches of snow inside, I can stick my nose in the plants and get a fresh whiff of spring and pick a fresh tomato. So how cool is that? You really can do this inside. And here is a better picture of my ripe tomatoes that I took with my real camera. A lot of the other pictures I took with my cell phone just because I wanted to take them and I didn't really intend on doing a video, so I just kind of pulled together everything that I had so that I could share this information. And here are some picked tomatoes in the middle of January. And just so you could see my lighting up here, I just have some cheap, they're 4-foot fluorescent lights. They're just standard like cool white lights that you would put in your house. And I have them going across, and you can see that there's a CFL here too pointing inward. Here is a shot of my indoor garden where there are 2 tomato plants here. Here's the washboard I told you about, and there's 3 more behind it. And over here you can see I have some aloe and some cilantro, and there's basil off behind the camera view. So I keep a couple of herbs that I like to grow and cook with. Also, tomato leaves. If you just add a little bit to your tomato sauce, it really brings out that tomato flavor. So that is how I grew tomatoes inside for all of my friends that have asked me to, tell you my secrets. It was the first time I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just ended up with tomatoes. So maybe I lucked out, but that's pretty much everything that I did. And if you had a more specific question, I suppose I could answer that. And then just in closing, I would like to dedicate this video to my late father-in-law, who taught me pretty much everything that I know now about plants and really gave me a love for farming and agriculture. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.